Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sian Kingi. Sian Kingi was born in New Zealand on December 16, 1974. When she was 7, her family moved to New Zealand, a small coastal town in Australia with a population of about 5,000. The area is known for its warm, pleasant climate. From a young age, Sian was a kind and gentle person who loved sports, particularly ballet and netball. Although she was naturally modest, she had a charming personality that made her popular among her peers. Sian was tall, had long blonde hair and striking eyes, which helped her stand out in school. Unfortunately, her beautiful appearance eventually led to serious consequences in her life. Friday, November 27, 1987, was an ordinary day. It was a beautiful sunny day. Typically, this time of year features perfect weather, warm sun and a cool breeze, so many locals were enjoying the beach. Sian's mother, Linda, went to the store to buy food and fabric to sew a lovely outfit for her daughter's upcoming birthday. After school, Sian got on her yellow bike, knowing she was going to the store to help her mother Linda choose fabric. Linda wanted to select something Sian would love, so she headed to the store right after classes ended. Once they chose the fabric for the dress, they were only free in the afternoon. After making their purchases, Linda planned to stop by the bakery to buy some treats for dinner. Sian was already feeling tired and wanted to head home. She asked her mother if she could go home by herself first. Her mother agreed, and Sian rode her bike along her favorite shortcut. While she had taken this route many times before, it didn't feel as safe today. In the 1980s, New Zealand was a peaceful small town where everyone knew each other, making it one of the safest places in the area. The Kingi family's home was only a few kilometers from the local store, they easily reachable by bike in just a few minutes. Linda felt secure allowing her 12-year-old daughter, Sian, to ride there alone, as nothing bad had ever happened in their quiet town. In fact, her mother would follow her right after buying a few things. At 4:45 p.m., Sian rode her bike toward home, taking a path that went through the park, while Linda drove a different route in her car. Since Sian wasn't biking too quickly, she and her mother were only a few minutes apart. Linda anticipated arriving home just after Sian. However, when returned, Linda found no one at home. Sian was not there, and her yellow bicycle was missing. Initially, Linda wasn't worried about Sian's absence. The girl might have met a friend or stopped by to visit someone, especially with the weekend approaching after a long school week. Teenagers often hang out after classes, and Sian had many friends, so it was normal for her to drop in on someone. Sian had just picked out a beautiful fabric with her mother, Linda, and she could have wanted to share her weekend plans with a friend, as they were also planning to meet up. However, Linda soon began to feel anxious. Sian was well-behaved and never stayed out long without permission. Then, Linda decided to call several of Sian's friends to check if she was with them. To her dismay, no one had seen Sian. By 8 p.m., Sian still hadn't returned home. Although they lived in a small, quiet town with little traffic, Sian always respected the curfew and never wandered outside after dark. On Friday evenings, people often relax and take walks after work. As darkness falls, even the safest towns can become risky. Linda recognized this, so she chose to walk the route that Sian typically took on her bike. This path was the quickest way from their home on the outskirts to the shops in the city. Linda and her husband walked together, and about halfway there, they discovered Sian's yellow bicycle abandoned, but they did not see the girl. The abandoned bike raised concerns, especially since it was Sian's first bike, one she had cherished and would never willingly leave behind. Unfortunately, they couldn't find Sian nearby. Her parents called for her, but there was no answer. They decided to head to the police station. Before leaving, they checked their house to see if Sian had returned and bring a picture of her. With the photo in hand, they went to meet the police. The officers took their report about Sian's disappearance and officially declared her missing. The community was tight-knit, and the city had an extremely low crime rate, so everyone believed Sian would be found quickly. This situation seems to stem from a simple misunderstanding. Sian might have been hanging out with friends or got lost while walking in the forest. However, one officer recalled that there had been a kidnapping in the area shortly before this incident. To address the situation, the police reached out to local media, as they did not have access to social networks or the internet at the time. The following morning, a report about Sian's disappearance was broadcasted in hopes of finding witnesses who might have seen her the night before. Several people came to the police station with information, but they all insisted they hadn't noticed anything suspicious. These witnesses had seen Linda and Sian while they were picking out fabric for a dress, but none of them saw Sian on their way home, and no one was on the path at that time. The witnesses provided varying details and tried to highlight any unusual occurrences, such as strange cars or odd behavior from local residents. However, they saw that was watching Linda and Sian. A witness reported seeing a dirty white station wagon on the evening of the incident. When police were notified, they discovered the car contained a dark-haired man and a heavy-set woman. They seemed to be aimlessly driving around, possibly searching for someone. It's conceivable that Sian might have come into contact with them. Witnesses noticed this suspicious couple shortly before Sian went missing. The police working on the case noted there were approximately 170,000 station wagons in the area, with about 10,000 of them being white. As a result, the search area has been much wider. Investigators needed to examine all the cars in the region and pursue additional leads. Many police officers and hundreds of volunteers joined the search. Friends, family, neighbors, and members of the community came together to assist in the search for Sian. Ground and air search teams were organized, and photographs of the location where Sian went missing were taken and shared with the media. This method is often used to help potential witnesses recall details about what happened that day. No one was able to provide useful information to the police at first. However, by Sunday, several new witnesses came forward and aided the investigation. The first witness was sunbathing by a stream in the forest when she was attacked by an unknown man. He harassed her and attempted to drag her into his car, which was identified as a white Kingwood station wagon. A second witness saw the incident and assisted the girl in fending off her attacker. Afterward, this witness followed the suspicious vehicle when the driver tried to flee the scene, but he eventually lost sight of them. He managed to give a detailed description of the car and provided the police with its license plate number, 429. The detectives decided to check the phone number associated with the car with that plate number. They found that this number was registered in the area. It belonged to a woman named Valmay Beck. The detectives quickly located her address and visited her home. A man answered the door and confirmed he knew Valmay. He explained that he was not her relative, but her stepson. He also added that her husband was Barry, and they had been married for a year. The description of Barry's closely matched the composite sketch created from the witness's account of the attack near the stream. The suspect's name was Barry Watts. However, the police lacked sufficient evidence to arrest him or accuse him of kidnapping Sian. Despite this, both Barry and Valmay were viewed as potential suspects in the case. Unfortunately, the man didn't know Barry and Valmay's whereabouts. They frequently moved and rented different places, which seemed suspicious. 3 days after Sian disappeared, another witness came forward with information. This witness also reported seeing a white Holden Kingwood near the creek and described the driver as athletic, mentioning a plump woman who was acting suspiciously. After conducting a background check on Barry and Valmay, the police discovered that both had recently been released from prison in Perth, Western Australia, right before Sian went missing. Both Barry and Valmay had extensive criminal records. Just weeks prior, they relocated to Queensland from Perth, pausing their criminal activities after serving their parole. They arrived in a sedan but quickly switched to a white station wagon, which had been linked to several suspicious incidents. The police recognized that they were dealing with dangerous individuals with a long history of armed robberies, break-ins, and forgery related to obtaining fraudulent documents. This was just a portion of Barry and Valmay's criminal history. This news was alarming for the Sian family. If their daughter, Sian, became involved with these individuals, her chances of being found alive and safe were slim. At the time, Barry was 33 years old, and Valmay was 43. Valmay had 6 children from previous relationships. Both police and Sian's family viewed Barry and Valmay as particularly dangerous criminal wanted. The authorities urgently needed to locate them to investigate their connection to Sian's disappearance. 6 days after Sian went missing, a man named Tim visited the police station to report bad news. He reported that the night before, as he was heading to work, he noticed a terrible, foul smell that initially made him think an animal had died nearby. On his way back, he felt compelled to check the area again and was hit by a strong smell of decay. At the side of the road near the stream, he discovered the body of a teenage girl. She was wearing a school uniform and had blonde hair. The police quickly arrived at the location provided by Tim and discovered the mutilated body of a schoolgirl. It was evident that she had been sexually assaulted. The autopsy revealed that she had been strangled, and her body had 12 stab wounds, 3 near her heart and 2 cuts on her throat. Additionally, her spine was broken, and her arms were so badly damaged they were nearly severed from her body. The level of violence indicated that her death was extremely painful. The police suspected that this victim was the missing girl, Sian. She was wearing the same clothes as described by Sian's mother. In the laboratory, a forensic expert confirmed that the victim was 12 years old Sian Kingi. 5 days after this gruesome discovery, family Sian's and friends came together to say their final goodbyes at her funeral. During the ceremony, a classmate read a passage from Peter Pan, suggesting that the girl would always be remembered. Flowers were placed along the route where the young girl had been found. Following media coverage of the incident, a nurse named Nicole Close contacted the police. She reported having seen some suspicious individuals in the area, they driving a white station wagon. One evening, after finishing her shift at the hospital, Nicole was walking through the parking lot to her car when she noticed a white car entering the lot and slowly approaching her. Sensing something was off, she quickly ran to her car, jumped inside, and locked the door. The station wagon did not back away but parked next to her passenger door. A man then got out and approached her window, asking for help with directions. Although he seemed calm and friendly, but she felt uneasy and wanted to end the conversation quickly. She noticed a suspicious-looking woman in the station wagon and thought she saw ropes in the back, which heightened her anxiety. The man continued to speak politely and stepping closer. Despite Nicole explaining the directions multiple times, he kept asking the same question and moved closer to her. Just as he was only a few steps away, Nicole spotted another man walking through the parking lot. The driver noticed him too, which distracted him and gave Nicole the chance to escape. She quickly backed into her car, locked the door, and drove away. Nicole recalled that this incident occurred on November 2nd, before Sian went missing. Investigators viewed the reports about the white car as significant and pursued this lead. Detectives showed Nicole a lineup of photographs featuring unfamiliar faces, and she clearly identified Barry and Valmay. But the testimonies didn't end there. The day after Nicole spoke to the police, another eyewitness came forward with information about a different attempted kidnapping. He reported seeing a man attack a woman on the street, holding a knife to her throat and trying to drag her into a white station wagon. The victim fought back, injuring the attacker's hand with his own knife, and managed to escape. Police then discovered fingerprints belonging to Barry on the woman's car. She also identified Barry and Valmay as likely involved in kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. The officers recognized that they were dealing with particularly dangerous criminals who posed a threat to the entire community. They issued descriptions of the suspects, Barry and Valmay, and their white car, making the information public through the media. Although it seemed the criminals were in hiding, but arrest warrants have been sent to police departments nationwide, indicating the possibility that they will be caught soon. In a small town, a local power grid worker was installing wiring when he spotted a car that matched the description of Barry and Valmay's station wagon. He remembered it because of a media alert he had seen a few days earlier. After coming down from his work, he was convinced that this was the car the police were looking for. He quickly went to the police station to mark the location on a map where he had seen the vehicle. When the patrol officers arrived, Barry and Valmay had already fled. Although the police tried to chase them, they lost track of Barry and Valmay once again. Later, the department received a tip about a money transfer made by Barry and Valmay as they were leaving New South Wales. The station wagon was tracked to a motel parking lot, and fortunately, it was still there when the police arrived. The hotel staff allowed the officers to access Barry and Valmay's room. Understanding that they were dealing with potentially armed and dangerous criminals, the officers prepared their weapons. To their surprise, Barry and Valmay did not put up a fight and were arrested in the motel room. The police discovered wigs, hair dye, and a hair clipper, suggesting that they was attempting to change their appearance to evade capture. The suspects, Barry and Valmay, were interrogated for about 12 hours, during which they remained completely silent. Barry did not cooperate at all. He informed the police that he had conspired with his wife, Valmay, to ensure she maintained the same story and did not reveal any important information. In contrast, Valmay quickly gave in. She thought that by doing so, she could reduce her sentence. What she revealed to the authorities was chilling. On November 27th, Valmay claimed that she and Barry were driving around the city in search of a new victim. Barry had an obsession with violence against women, particularly targeting those who were much younger than him. His wife, Valmay, being 10 years older, did not fit his preferences. To fulfill his disturbing desires, Barry started to rape and murder girls who fit his idea of youth and beauty. Valmay claimed she went along with his actions because she was afraid of losing him. On the morning of Sian's disappearance, they spent several hours driving around, believing that finding a girl would be easy. However, most of the girls were with others, making it difficult to kidnap someone discreetly. Barry attempted to approach a number of girls himself, but they managed to evade him. Eventually, he realized that he was not as trustworthy as his wife, so he decided to use Valmay as bait to attract the girls. They parked near a local park and got out of the car. While walking along the trail, they noticed a girl on a yellow bicycle. Barry selected her as his target, and Valmay pretended to be in distress, asking the girl for help because she was having trouble with her dog. Sian, a kind-hearted girl, came Valmay and engaging in conversation. At that moment, Barry attacked Sian from behind, muffling her screams and dragging her into his dirty car. Inside, he restrained her with tape. Valmay sat in the back seat with Sian, while Barry drove away. They traveled 12 kilometers from where the abduction occurred and stopped in a forest. There, Barry laid out a blanket and started raping Sian for several hours, fulfilling his twisted desires. Valmay later reported that Sian showed incredible courage throughout the process of being raped by Barry, she enduring the abuse without crying. She complied with Barry's demands, hoping her obedience would somehow spare her life and that they might let her go. However, from the start, Barry never planned to let her live. His intent was to satisfy his twisted fantasies. Barry started to strangle the Sian and stabbed her with a knife, causing fatal injuries. Throughout this horrific scene, Valmay watched without intervening. She later reported that the belt used for strangling Sian, along with the knife and other items, were discarded nearby in a stream. The police went to the specified location, and Valmay provided them with details about the crime scene. They were able to recover evidence, including light-colored hair that seemed to belong to Sian. Valmay's confession took up 28 pages, describing the terrible ordeal the young victim Sian endured before her death. Although Barry remained unyielding during the interrogation, he became enraged upon learning of his wife's confession, Valmay. To ensure Barry was convicted, investigators attempted to extract a confession from him. However, they were unable to do so. As a result, they decided to use a complex strategy. They planned to place an undercover agent in the temporary detention cell where Barry was held. This spy will spend time with Barry as a fellow prisoner, aiming to establish a friendly relationship with him, which will hopefully lead to receiving a confession from him. A special spy was chosen for this dangerous mission because he was able to withstand the psychological pressure that the mission would cause. He was supposed to listen to Barry confess about the brutal treatment of Sian. But ultimately, this mission did not result in a confession. Meanwhile, Barry remained agitated and was desperately trying to escape punishment. During one meeting with his wife, Valmay, he subtly suggested that she should end her life before the trial to avoid testifying against him. He implied that if she chose not to, she would face serious consequences according to state law. Barry communicated with his wife very cautiously, carefully choosing his words to prevent the authorities from using their phone conversations against him. Fortunately, Valmay did not listen to Barry, which ultimately saved her life. When Barry and Valmay arrived at court, around 200 people were present, ready to confront the brutal murderers. During the trial, Valmay testified against her husband, Barry, portraying him as a true monster. She tried to defend herself by claiming she was coerced into the horrific acts. However, there was strong evidence suggesting she participated willingly. On October 20, 1988, the jury began deliberating on the verdict. After 3 hours, the jurors found the defendants Barry and Valmay guilty. Valmay Beck received a sentence of 10 years for kidnapping and life in prison for murder. However, due to her cooperation with the prosecution, she was granted the possibility of temporary release. The jury spent 6 hours discussing Barry's sentence. Finally, Barry Watts was found guilty of murder, kidnapping, and rape, receiving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His case was officially archived, meaning he would not be eligible for release. However, the story of Barry and Valmay didn't end in prison. Barry started bragging about his crimes and told a cellmate that he had committed a similar offense. He mentioned the murder of 31-year-old teacher, Helen Marie Fenney, who went missing on October 29 of that year. Investigators later discovered that Valmay was also involved in this incident. Valmay admitted to witnessing her husband murder the teacher Helen, after which they placed her body in the trunk of their car and disposed of it in a landfill near Brisbane. Barry remained silent during police questioning, refusing to provide any information about the second victim, Helen. He seemed to hope to challenge the verdict in Sian's case in the future. However, in 2007, he confessed to murdering Sian and detailing the crime. Valmay endured assaults while in her cell, suffering regular beatings, including a severe head injury from a tin can. To ensure her safety, she was transferred to a more secure correctional facility. During her time there, she converted to Christianity and started to make positive changes in her life. Valmay applied for parole 3 times but was denied each time. In 2007, she divorced her husband, Barry. She also struggled with serious health issues, such as obesity and diabetes. In 2008, her health declined significantly, leading doctors to place her in an induced coma immediately after heart surgery. The police hoped that while she was on her deathbed, she would confess to additional crimes that she and Barry was suspected of, including numerous kidnappings, rapes, and murders in the area. Sadly, she passed away at the age of 64 without regaining consciousness, taking with her all the secrets of their horrific crimes. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jordan Worth. Alexander Skeel was born on August 17, 1995, in Kingston upon Hull. He grew up in a loving and supportive family. The boys spent their first months in the hospital in special rooms for premature babies, where they fought against very low body weight. Thankfully, with the help of skilled doctors, the children began to recover. However, Alexander's brother gained weight more quickly, and by their first birthday, he showed almost no signs of being premature. In contrast, Alexander was weaker and dealt with a condition called hydrocephalus, which is the excessive buildup of fluid in the brain, leading to him being classified as disabled. Despite these health challenges from birth, Alexander's intellectual growth was unaffected, and physically, he was similar to his classmates. He even participated actively in sports at school. Their parents adored their sons from a young age, showering them with love and care while investing time and money in their education and overall well-being. After graduating from high school, both brothers enrolled in the prestigious Bedford College to continue their studies. Alexander was intelligent, attractive, and made an effort to go to the gym regularly, which helped him gain attention from women. However, unlike his brother, who actively dated and had a vibrant social life, Alexander was shy and preferred to concentrate on his studies. In college, Alexander experienced love at first sight when he met a stunning girl named Jordan Worth. They were the same age, and Jordan came from a wealthy family. Growing up, she was used to getting what she wanted and rarely faced rejection. She always dressed elegantly, took great care of her appearance, and enjoyed a vibrant social life. Jordan was one of the most popular girls on campus and attracted the attention of many admirers. Besides her studies, she volunteered her time, raising funds and providing aid to local shelters for homeless animals as well as to children facing hunger in Africa. Jordan's efforts to make a positive impact were recognized multiple times. At first, her appeared to be an angel, kind, caring, smart, and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her instantly but assumed that the outgoing and popular Jordan would never notice him. To his surprise, she was also drawn to him and took the first step to get to know him. Although Jordan was more experienced in relationships, for the shy Alexander, she was his very first love. The couple started dating in 2012 when they were both just 17 years old. Initially, their relationship was thriving. They spent a lot of time together and were nearly inseparable. At college, they were often referred to as the most beautiful couple, which made Jordan feel very flattered. The first 6 months of their relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. They surprised each other with thoughtful gifts and enjoyed celebrating small but meaningful milestones. Their social media accounts were filled with photos of them together, showcasing their happiness and featuring heartfelt captions and declarations of love. To outsiders, it appeared that they were perfect for each other and destined for a long, happy life together. They quickly decided to move in together and rented an apartment. As they were both still students, their parents provided substantial financial support. Fortunately, their parents were supportive of their relationship. Jordan was particularly fond of Alexander's parents because she came across as a responsible young woman with aspirations to become an art history teacher, leaving a positive impression on everyone she met. As time went on, Jordan's behavior started to change. It began with her increasing demands. Each month, She wanted Alexander to update her on everything he did. She openly checked his personal messages on his phone, email, and social media. She would get jealous for no apparent reason. Although this behavior was concerning, Alexander tried to ignore it because he was in love, and it didn't bother him too much. Even when she insisted he wore only the clothes she bought for him, he dismissed it as her way of showing care. Soon, Jordan began to restrict Alexander's social circle. She decided who he could see and who he could no longer stay in touch with, affecting not just his friends and classmates but also his family members. Despite this control, Jordan never complained to anyone, and they still appeared to be a happy and perfect couple in public and on social media. She began to enjoy her control over him. She deleted contacts from Alexander's phone without his knowledge, blocked his family and friends, and even replied to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting way. Afterward, she deleted these conversations, so Alexander had no idea what he had said to people who no longer wanted to communicate with him. The final reason for the breakup occurred when Alexander's twin brother raised concerns. Jordan started to block their communication. By then, their parents also noticed that Alexander was pulling away from the family, while his girlfriend was avoiding them completely. She refused to visit even on holidays and didn't want to talk on the phone. When they did try to reach her, she was openly rude. In the rare moments when Alexander's mother managed to speak with him, she urged him to break up with his girlfriend, warning that the relationship would lead to trouble. However, Alexander, deeply in love, refused to listen and defended his girlfriend, insisting that she cared for him and meant no harm. The Skeel family soon realized that Jordan had pressured their son to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. Meanwhile, she took all the money he earned to spend on her own needs and entertainment. The parents once again tried to talk to their son and persuade him to leave Jordan, but they were unsuccessful. In 2013, during his coming-of-age celebration, Jordan committed a shocking act that went unpunished. That day, she and her friends celebrated at a country hotel. As the evening progressed and guests began to leave, Jordan suddenly vanished without telling anyone. Alexander was distraught as he searched for Jordan, fearing something had happened to her. However, she returned to their room in the morning, heavily intoxicated. When Alexander tried to find out where she had been, she violently lashed out at him with both fists and insults, then laughed. 2 months later, during his own 18th birthday celebration, Jordan started a fight in front of Alexander's family and friends. She assaulted a 15-year-old girl, who was a neighbor well known to the Skeel family and had been invited to the party. Jordan believed the girl was being overly friendly with Alexander, which prompted her to attack, pulling the girl's hair and scratching her face. Jordan was still upset, but it was obvious to everyone what her true nature was. Afterward, her parents and brother urged Alexander to break up with her because of her aggressive and inappropriate behavior. Surprisingly, for the first time, he listened to them and acknowledged that she had indeed overreacted. That same evening, he spoke with her and informed her that he would not be returning to their apartment and would instead stay at his parents' house. After nearly 6 months apart, they reunited and had children together. During that time, Alexander focused on his studies and work, rarely thinking of Jordan. However, on New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised him with a call to share the news that she was pregnant and they would be parents in the spring. Alexander felt both surprised and happy. Jordan apologized for not telling him sooner, explaining that she believed he no longer wanted to see her. When the guy's parents found out they were going to have a grandchild, they were overjoyed and invited Jordan to move in with them. She accepted the offer and moved into the Skeel family home. She officially got married with Alexander, and 3 months later, she and Alexander welcomed a son named William. The young parents were extremely happy, and they enjoyed a peaceful and harmonious life together until around mid-fall 2014. During this time, Jordan genuinely cared for her partner, made an effort to please him, and fell in love with him again. When William was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. During this time, she became moody and emotional, insisting that Alexander move out of his parents' house immediately. Alexander attributed her behavior to hormonal changes but agreed to rent an apartment for them in the city, and they soon moved in. In the summer of 2015, they welcomed their second child, a girl named Alice. Alexander was overjoyed and treated his wife and children with great affection. However, Jordan, feeling secure that Alexander would not leave her, began to reveal her darker side. The turning point occurred after the move. Jordan prohibited her husband from contacting his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Meanwhile, she accepted financial help from them and even had Alexander ask his parents for money. Within a few months, she completely dominated him, breaking his spirit and taking control of his life. Jordan frequently humiliated and insulted her husband, and eventually, she began to hit him. At first, her attacks were not severe, as she wanted to see how he would react. When she realized he would tolerate everything, keep quiet, and face no consequences for her actions, she unleashed her cruelty, revealing her violent tendencies. The trouble began during their house renovation when she was unhappy with everything Alexander did. Frustrated, he remarked that it seemed impossible to satisfy her. In response, she threw a hammer at him, hitting him on the head and causing a deep wound. Dazed and nearly unconscious, he fell to the ground, holding his head as blood streamed down his face. He asked his wife for help or to call an ambulance, but she coldly told him, "Crawl away somewhere and die," and walked into another room to watch TV. Alexander treated his head injury on his own without visiting a doctor or telling anyone. This led Jordan to believe she could do anything without consequences, convinced her husband would never report her actions and would avoid both hospitals and the police. For the next 3 years, Alexander endured constant emotional and physical suffering. He became so depressed that he didn't recognize the threat he was under. Despite this, he continued to work hard to provide for his family, but his frustration and dissatisfaction with his wife grew steadily. Jordan not only controlled him every day but also escalated the cruelty. He was not allowed to sleep on the bed and had to lie on the floor next to the bed, without a blanket or pillow. He was also banned from entering the kitchen and could only eat the leftovers that his wife and children didn't finish. This left Alexander starving. As he was unable to buy food, Jordan had taken all his money. Furthermore, his wife deprived him of sleep and rest, creating a cruel form of entertainment for herself. Whenever he finally fell asleep, she would hit him on the head or pour boiling water on him. He later remembered waking up each time in intense pain, either bleeding or burned. After that, he would tend to his wounds with whatever he could find, while his wife quietly went to bed. Alexander viewed this situation as normal. He felt morally defeated and stopped trying to fight against it. He completely cut off communication with his parents and brother, and his wife frequently asked them for money on his behalf. She also supported her own parents financially, ensuring she could afford whatever she wanted. Alexander lost a significant amount of weight and dropped below 50 pounds. His body was frequently marked by wounds, cuts, burns, and bruises, which drew concern from others. At his workplace, colleagues encouraged him to seek medical help, but his wife insisted he quit his job to avoid being discovered. After he was let go, he became trapped with Jordan, who began to abuse him continuously, leaving him longing for rescue. Although the couple appeared to be happy to outsiders, their home life was filled with horror. Jordan managed social media accounts for her husband, frequently sharing old photos of their family along with captions expressing their love and gratitude for one another. Nobody could have imagined that a woman who looked angelic and was a mother of 2 could transform into a sophisticated monster behind closed doors. She knocked out her husband's teeth and inflicted a deep cut on his arm with a knife. His body also showed signs of burns, but he was unable to go to the hospital. At home, he had only plastic wrap and tape, which he used to bind his wounds. Neighbors often heard screams coming from their house, and some were so alarming that they called the police. However, Jordan always managed to convince the officers that everything was fine between her and her husband. During the next visit by the police, prompted by neighbors' concerns, one officer noticed a man with a fresh wound and blood running down his arm. The man appeared emaciated and had bruises of various sizes on his face. Jordan attempted to explain to the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes harmed himself. However, this time the police called for paramedics, and Alexander was taken to the hospital. The doctors were shocked by his condition. He was barely alive, and his arm was so severely injured that amputation was a real possibility. Alexander had severe second and third-degree burns covering his body. He weighed just 94 pounds, and his shoulder ligaments were injured from being hit with a screwdriver. He also had a deep cut on his forearm, several knocked-out teeth, and many bruises. During this time, Jordan entered the hospital, insisting that her husband be released to her. She claimed that he was fine and that he had caused all his injuries himself. However, no one believed her distressed claims, and it was decided to take her to the police station for questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing and stuck to her claim that her husband was harming himself. However, when Alexander's parents arrived at the police station after visiting him in the hospital, her attitude changed. She went on to explain in detail the actions she had taken against her husband, saying she had trained him like a dog and that he couldn't escape from her. At the same time, Jordan argued that her husband's behavior provoked her violence, alleging he was cheating on her and intentionally trying to upset her. She also maintained that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-harm. The man's parents firmly denied all the claims made against him. However, he hesitated to speak out against his wife at first. It was only after receiving treatment and consulting with a psychologist that Alexander found the courage to share the traumatic experiences he endured at home in recent years. Jordan believed that she would only receive a minor administrative penalty, so she was not particularly concerned about the upcoming trial. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge convicted 22-year-old Jordan of deliberately causing serious harm, both physical and emotional abuse, as well as coercive control. She received a prison sentence of 7.5 years. Her status as a mother of 2 young children did not lessen the severity of her punishment. Jordan was taken aback by this sentence, as the case was unprecedented in the UK. The children were placed in the care of their father and grandparents during their mother's imprisonment. After fully recovering from years of abuse, Alexander began working in the community and is now helping victims of domestic violence. On July 4, 2023, Jordan was released on parole after serving 5 years of her 7.5-year sentence. However, she is not allowed to approach her ex-husband or see their children. She is currently engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Stepp and is getting ready to become a mother for the 3rd time. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Sean Eckerd. Donna and Samuel Eckerd were a couple who were related before they got married. Both had experienced unsuccessful marriages before and had a total of 6 adult children. After a difficult past, they found peace with each other and decided to move to San Diego, California, to start a new life. There, they rented a spacious house and regularly attended local church activities on weekends. The family was very religious and lived a quiet life without much social interaction. A few years after moving, the family welcomed their first son, Stanley, and 2 years later, their second son, Sean. Donna devoted all her time to taking care of the house and raising the 2 children, so the boys grew up surrounded by love and care. Both attended a good local school. On weekends, the family participated in church activities. As adults, the 2 children left their parents to start their own family's acros. The country. However, the Eckerd family still maintained a close relationship. They often contacted each other, called each other, and spent all their holidays together. Sian was a cheerful and easygoing boy. He was attractive, intelligent, and a good listener, so he made friends easily. In contrast, Stanley was a bit shy and found socializing difficult. He was often reserved about new things and had trouble communicating with his younger brother. Despite their different personalities, the two brothers were very close and cared for each other. They had the same group of friends and were always ready to help one another. Both were well-behaved and good at studying. The relationship between Sian and Stanley was very good. They trusted each other and often joked happily. Their parents also supported this relationship. In the family, mutual respect was highly valued. Donna and Samuel raised their children in the faith and the law of God from an early age. The Eckerd family lived quietly. Vs. As they grew up, the two brothers developed very different interests. Sian, the youngest, played in a band, while Stanley, the oldest, loved martial arts. Every evening, the family gathered before dinner to share their experiences of the day. Sian was usually the first to tell a story, and stories about music, friends, and his future plans took up most of the time. Everyone listened attentively to Sian. Stanley, on the other hand, had few opportunities to share and did not feel like he had much to say. He had no big plans for the future, nor interesting stories or experiences with friends to hold attention. So Stanley often listened quietly to his younger brother's stories. One evening, Sian told his family about Mary Jane, his new neighbor. She was a beautiful young woman with bright brown eyes and long blonde hair. Sian was fascinated by the wonderful piano music coming from her house. Enthralled by the music, Sian boldly entered the house without knocking. Although the situation was somewhat awkward, Sian handled it with confidence and grace, making a good impression on Mary Jane. Although she was a few years older than Sian, they became close friends. Sian often organized picnics and invited Mary Jane to join. They went on many walks together, visiting parks and observatories. However, their budding romance was interrupted by the difficulties of adult life. The Eckerd family received news that Donna, Sian's mother, was seriously ill. Sian's parents tried to consider the interests of everyone in the family when making a decision, but this completely changed their lives. Although Sian did not want to leave his hometown, friends, and Mary Jane, he was forced to accept his parents' decision. In 2005, the Eckerd family decided to leave the city where they had lived for many years and move to another state. They settled in Donna's mother's house in the small town of Spring Hill, Florida. This decision brought many positive changes to the whole family. Donna began to recover. Initially, Sian felt sad about leaving the band, familiar places, and friends, especially Mary Jane. However, with his optimistic personality, Sian quickly adapted to his new life. Gradually, he realized that life in Spring Hill was as full and meaningful as in the old place. Donna and Samuel found stable jobs at the Presbyterian Church, where they spent most of their time. Donna worked at the nursery, taking care of children, while Samuel assisted at the chapel. Gradually, the two brothers regained their close relationship and made friends at their new school. Their lives seemed to be reborn in this new environment. Sian continued to join the school band, while Stanley attended a martial arts school near his new home. Despite his busy life, Sian could not stop thinking about Mary Jane. Every night after school, Sian would stay in his room and talk on the phone for hours. The conversations always ended with Sian promising to meet his girlfriend again. He promised to visit her as soon as his parents allowed it. While Sian kept his first love in his heart, his older brother Stanley tried to assert himself in the family. Stanley had a quiet and humble personality and seemed to receive little attention from his parents. In order to attract attention, he made many wrong decisions, which had serious consequences for the whole family. In May 2006, he informed his parents of his intention to drop out of school to pursue a martial arts career and open a martial arts club. However, due to the recklessness of youth, he joined a bad group, where he began to engage in petty fraud and experiment with illegal drugs. By 2007, bad relationships led to Stanley's arrest for theft and fraud. The news of his eldest son's wrongdoing shocked Donna, causing her to be hospitalized for a heart attack. Fortunately, the situation was quickly resolved with the help of a lawyer. This lawyer skillfully defended Stanley by pointing out the lack of direct evidence, helping him to be quickly released and receive only a suspended sentence. This incident left Stanley extremely scared, feeling guilty, hoping for sympathy and acceptance from his family. Meanwhile, after experiencing the terrifying events that happened to Stanley, Sian did not tell his parents about his decision. During the summer vacation, he worked as a waiter to save money. He then left a note for his mother, informing her that he was going to California to meet Mary Jane. The 2-day bus ride to Sian's lover seemed endless. The scenery changed, day turned to night, and Sian looked forward to meeting Mary Jane at the final destination. When the bus stopped, Sian eagerly ran to her, having seen her radiant face and long hair through the window. They spent the happiest days together, going on picnics like in high school. For the first time, Sian expressed his love to Mary, and she returned his feelings. After a walk, Sian and Mary Jane sat down on a bench. Suddenly, Sian felt dizzy, his vision went black, and he fainted. He was rushed to the hospital, his health rapidly deteriorating. Mary Jane contacted Sian's sister, Jennifer, who hurried to California. Doctors determined that the cause of Sian's rapid deterioration was a tick-borne disease. The disease developed suddenly and rapidly, causing many complications, including encephalitis. A grueling battle to save Sian's life began, with doctors working tirelessly for a long time to bring him back to health. After more than a month in a coma and 6 months of rehabilitation, Sian was saved. His recovery was arduous. It was surprising that a small tick bite during a summer walk could cause such a serious illness. Jennifer took her brother back to Florida for further treatment and long-term recovery. Mary Jane was forced to stay behind, only able to communicate with her boyfriend by phone. Despite the hardships and unexpected illness, these events brought the Eckerd family closer together. Donna did her best to help her beloved son Sian overcome his serious illness. She closely monitored his diet and exercise regimen. This devoted care helped Sian recover completely, but also caused Stanley to gradually harbor resentment and jealousy. After recovering, Sian continued his music studies and graduated in 2009. He dreamed of introducing Mary Jane, his favorite, to his family. However, this plan did not work out. Instead, Stanley introduced his younger brother to Samantha Rowe. Samantha, a native of Florida, quickly became friends with the two brothers. Stanley was fond of her and sympathetic towards her, while she was attracted to Sian's cheerful and outgoing personality. For a while, Stanley actively pursued Samantha, and she reciprocated his interest. They had a few romantic dates, ending in passionate kisses. Stanley was very happy, but Samantha, despite accepting his advances, could not stop thinking about Sian. Samantha wrote Sian a text message expressing her emotional and inviting him to go for a walk. Sian agreed, and the wife spent the evening walking along the river, talking about Stanley and Mary Jane. Sian had no intention of winning Samantha over because he already had a girlfriend. After being rejected, Samantha sent Stanley a text message, falsely claiming that Sian had met her and confessed that he liked her. Stanley was very angry. That night, he went up to Sian's room and they talked. At first, they spoke quietly, then argued loudly, and finally fell completely silent. The parents did not intervene in the quarrel between the two brothers because they were used to it. It was the mother who first discovered Sian missing when he did not answer the phone. The night before, Stanley had explained to his mother that Sian had left after an argument. After 2 days of searching, the police received an unusual call from Sian's sister, Jennifer. In the call, they heard only a woman's screams and a man's moans in the background. After being asked repeatedly to calm down, Jennifer finally spoke clearly to the police. She was still screaming for help and reported that her brother Stanley had killed Sian. She said that Stanley was in the house talking to his mother and that Stanley's father, Samuel, was lying next to Sian's body. She pleaded for immediate help. The police arrived at the crime scene and found a horrific sight in the backyard. Samuel was on his knees, his hands full as he tried to pull his son's body from the wet ground. He screamed and wiped the dirt off Sian. The once peaceful neighborhood, with its beautiful lawns where the two brothers often waved to neighbors, had now become the scene of a tragedy. The Eckerd family, who had happily raised 2 sons, now faced terrible grief. One son was dead, and the other was under arrest. Stanley was arrested on suspicion of murder. During his initial interview, he claimed he had no intention of killing his brother. In a fit of rage, Stanley had hit Sian in the head, causing him to fall and die. After realizing his brother was dead, Stanley White tied up the body and buried it in the backyard. During the investigation, Stanley said, "I buried him. After all, that's what you do with dead people." This statement sounded cold and emotionless, more like the words of a serial killer than those of a loving brother. To justify his actions, Stanley said that he did it for his mother, he wanting to protect her from the shock of hearing about Sian's death. Stanley planned to move and rebury his younger brother's body after their parents died. During the interrogation, Stanley displayed many different emotions. At times he cried, confessed, and showed remorse, claiming it was an accident. But at other times, he showed hatred and spoke harshly about Sian. He blamed his younger brother for all his troubles and admitted that Sian had won the competition for the love of their mother and Samantha. On the day of the incident, Stanley was charged with second-degree murder and held without bail. 2 days later, Dr. Barbara Wolf performed an autopsy on Sian and submitted the forensic report to the court. The results showed that the victim had bruises under the skin and rope marks on his neck, indicating that he had been compressed, causing difficulty breathing. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head and asphyxiation. Assistant State Attorney Pete McGough investigated the case thoroughly. On February 25, 2011, the first hearing took place, with District Judge Stephen Rushing presiding. Stanley's parents, Donna and Samuel Eckerd, sat in the second row, crying as they watched their eldest son being led into the courtroom. On April 9, 2013, Stanley Eckerd's trial began in the Hernando Courthouse, with District Judge Anthony Taddy presiding. Attorney Alan Hunter represented the defendant, and Pete McGough was the prosecutor. The prosecutor tried to prove that Stanley had carefully planned the murder. The defense attorney argued that it was just a random fight that went horribly wrong. He also highlighted Stanley's attempts to conceal the crime as a sign of remorse. Stanley Eckerd is charged with first-degree murder and could face life in prison if convicted. The trial is scheduled to last 5 days, starting May 13. Judge Anthony Taddy will make the final decision. If convicted of second-degree murder, Stanley could still face life in prison. Stanley Eckerd has always maintained that he did not intend to kill his brother. 3 years ago, before burying his brother's body in their front yard, Eckerd rejected a prosecutor's offer to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a maximum 20-year prison sentence. Eckert remained calm as the clerk read the verdict. The brothers' parents, Samuel and Donna, wept silently as the jury left the courtroom. Samuel Eckert's sobs turned to screams, and several relatives gathered around to comfort him. The jury agreed that Stanley did not intend to kill his 19-year-old brother, Sean, but they did not completely exonerate him. After about 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury of 9 women and 3 men found Stanley Eckert guilty of second-degree murder. However, the Eckert family still believes Stanley's account of the events that occurred in the early morning hours of June 19, 2010, and criticized the state attorney's office for bringing the case. Samuel Eckert, Stanley's father, praised Chief Assistant Public Defender Alan Lanter for his good work in defending the case. The family questioned the appropriateness of the verdict and appealed, but their appeal was denied. Samuel expressed surprise that the jury reached its verdict so quickly but insisted that the family's belief remains unchanged. He also acknowledged one undeniable fact: after his younger brother died, Stanley dragged Sean's body out of his bedroom window and buried it in the backyard of their Spring Hill home. Samuel discovered Sean's body 2 days later. Assistant District Attorney Pete began his closing by showing the jury a photo of Sean's body rolled up in the dirt. Pete emphasized that this was not a cold case and pointed out that Stanley had changed his story several times when questioned about his younger brother's death. Pete went on to say that after Sean's funeral, Stanley forged text messages from Sean's phone, claiming he was in California with his girlfriend. Stanley also forged letters from Sean to Samantha, telling her not to contact him and to focus on Stanley instead. Finally, after hours of questioning, Stanley admitted that Sean had died in a fight in the bedroom. Stanley said he heard Sean's neck snap as they hit the floor. Stanley hid the body to protect his mother, who had heart problems, and planned to tell his father after she left for work. Pete concluded that Stanley caused the injuries that led to Sean's death, which constituted murder. He highlighted Stanley's statement to police about a dispute involving Samantha, as well as Stanley's conversation with his younger brother and a friend about revenge beefo. Sean died. During that conversation, the friend said Stanley mentioned that if he wanted to kill someone, he would hit them in the back of the head and bury them in the yard. However, this evidence was not strong enough to eliminate all reasonable doubt. Alan Lanter, defending, argued that the crime did not involve a deliberate act. Stanley was involved in his younger brother's death, but it was not murder, he said. Alan cited the medical examiner's testimony, saying that the blow to the head, combined with the swelling of his brain from encephalitis, could have caused his death. The pathologist also confirmed that hitting his head on the nightstand and the two fell could have been enough to cause Sean's death. Finally, Alan reminded the jury of Donna Eckert's testimony, which stated that Sean had severe mood swings after suffering from encephalitis. In her testimony, Donna Eckert even called Sean's death an accident. The jury could have found Stanley Eckert guilty of third-degree murder or manslaughter, making this an excusable homicide case. Attorney Allen asked the jury not to let the gruesome images of Sean's body and Stanley's actions in burying it distract them from the real cause of his death. Stanley Eckert did a terrible thing after Sean died, but he was not a murderer, Allen stressed. During the final trial, Eckert's parents were devastated when Judge Anthony sentenced Samuel Eckert to 50 years in prison without parole. They felt as if they had lost both their sons on the same day. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Winkler family. Matthew Bryan Winkler was born on November 21, 1974, in Henderson, Tennessee. He was the youngest of 3 sons, with 2 older brothers, James and Daniel. Matthew's parents, Dan and Diane Winkler, were deeply religious and they raised their sons very strictly. It is worth noting that Matthew became a 5th-generation church pastor. His father, Uncle Michael, grandfather Wendell, great-grandfather Merlin Winkler and great-grandfather Merlin Paul Winkler Sr., have all been pastors of the gospel. Matthew grew up in a respected family. His father was the head of the local preacher's school and was a well-known figure in their hometown. As a result, Matthew and his brother attended Sunday school and actively participated in church activities. Outside of church, Matthew excelled in high school soccer, with many believing he had the potential to become a world-class athlete. As the head of the family frequently traveled for his preaching activities, he was often accompanied by his wife and children. As a result, their children, including Matthew, attended multiple schools during childhood. Despite this, he was an outgoing and friendly child who easily made friends in each new place. When Matthew finished high school, his family was living in Austin, Texas. He was a charismatic person but didn't excel academically. Following graduation, Matthew attended Freed-Hardeman College and graduated successfully. During his time at college, Matthew began developing his pastoral skills under his father's guidance. He served as the youth minister at the Central Church of Christ in McMinnville. He was later appointed as the preacher at the Church of Christ located on 4th Street in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carroll was born in December 1973 in G Township, Tennessee. She was the elder of two sisters, raised by parents who were deeply devoted to their Christian faith. In fact, her father was a pastor at the local church, where Mary and her younger sister attended Sunday school. A few years after Mary was born, Mary's parents had a second daughter. She was born prematurely and had serious health issues, including cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and intellectual disabilities. This was very challenging for her parents to accept, so they looked for different treatments and even tried experimental therapy to help her. Unfortunately, none of these treatments led to improvements in her health. Mary loved her younger sister dearly and always tried to care for her with kindness and compassion. In 1987, tragedy struck when Mary's 10-year-old sister suffered an epileptic seizure while bathing. Mary had briefly left the room to retrieve something from the bathing accessories, and by the time Mary returned, her sister was no longer breathing. Despite efforts to revive her sister, but she passed away. For Mary, a 13-year-old girl, this was a big shock and the first loss in her life. She was shaken. Consumed by guilt and self-blame, Mary struggled to cope with her grief and she had a nervous breakdown. Mary teachers, concerned about her well-being, referred her to the school psychologist. The therapy sessions were very effective, but they did not last long. When her father discovered the therapy sessions, he became outraged and forbade Mary from continuing, insisting that family problems should be kept within the family. Unfortunately, Mary never received real attention from her parents. Mary grew up as a shy and modest person. After her younger sister's tragic death, causing Mary to become increasingly withdrawn and struggled with the emotional trauma. Her father did not allow her to seek help from therapists, which led to serious psychological problems over time. Years later, Mary's parents decided to adopt a young girl named Charlotte from a troubled large family. Shortly after, they also welcomed Charlotte's two brothers and sister into their home, reuniting the siblings. As the older sibling, Mary took care of the younger children and helped her mother. Around the same time, Mary met Matthew, who had just graduated from high school. He was charming, handsome, and popular among girls. However, his strict religious upbringing prevented him from freely expressing his romantic feelings. Despite this, Mary and Matthew quickly hit it off, which soon blossomed into love. As their feelings grew deeper and deeper, they decided to take the next step. After a few months, they introduced each other to their parents, who gave their blessing. With their parents' approval, Mary and Matthew began planning their wedding, which took place in April 1994. When Matthew's family welcomed their first daughter, Patricia, his college education was temporarily postponed. To support his family, He worked at a construction site, but he only did it for a short time because he was not used to hard physical labor. This was when Mary began to notice that Matthew had a difficult temperament. He would often get angry over nothing, become easily irritated, and have trouble controlling his temper. Mary, a gentle and quiet young woman, decided not to speak out about the issues she faced, and instead she kept her family problems to herself. Mary, brought up in a patriarchal household, she had been taught to obey her husband without question. Initially, the Winklers lived close to Mary's parents, allowing her to visit them frequently. However, their lives took a turn for the worse when Mary's mother, Mrs. Freeman, was diagnosed with cancer. The disease progressed rapidly, and she passed away within a few months. This loss was another blow to Mary. Now she has the responsibility of taking care of her little siblings. Mary's situation became increasingly complex during this time due to her second pregnancy. Following the birth of their second daughter, the family relocated to a new city where they purchased a small home. After the move, Mary became fully devoted to caring for her baby, which led to her nearly ceasing communication with her father and younger siblings. Their constant need for attention overwhelmed her, which further strained their relationships. Additionally, Mary struggling with severe postpartum depression. Those close to the Winkler family noticed changes in Mary's behavior and personality that seemed unusual and concerning. As an introverted person with sociophobic tendencies, she found it challenging to connect with others and form friendships. She gets upset easily, and any little thing can bring her to tears. During this period, as Matthew's career as a pastor progressed, Mary grew increasingly withdrawn. The situation further deteriorated when she became pregnant for the third time, and a few months later, discovered that the fetus had not survived, adding to her emotional pain. This news was devastating for Mary, who had been eagerly anticipating the arrival of this child. Several months earlier, Mary had been overjoyed when she finally became pregnant after a 2-year wait, signaled by the 2 long-awaited lines on her pregnancy test. However, Mary's happiness was tempered by fear, and she chose to keep her pregnancy a secret for a long time. Eventually, as her condition became more noticeable, people around her began speculating about her unusual behavior and private life. Those who knew Mary closely believed that her unusual behavior was due to the severe trauma she experienced in her childhood, which had taken a toll on her emotional well-being. Behind closed doors, Matthew and Mary's seemingly perfect marriage was far from ideal. Matthew would often shout and snap at his wife, Mary, for no apparent reason, much to the concern of their neighbors. Despite her efforts to maintain a facade of a happy marriage, the truth began to unravel when Mary appeared with a huge black eye. Although she claimed it was an accident, rumors quickly spread about the pastor's violent behavior towards his wife. The tension in their relationship worsened when Matthew had a growing desire to try new things in the bedroom, and he suggested to his wife that they experiment with role-playing, adult toys, and other activities. However, these ideas were met with strong disapproval from Mary. She had been raised in a conservative and strict family, found these ideas to be completely unacceptable. As a result, she firmly told Matthew that she would not engage in such activities. This led to Matthew becoming angry and frustrated, and he repeatedly attempted to force Mary to give in to his desires. The situation became increasingly unbearable for Mary, who suffered abuse from her husband in the bedroom. She eventually confided in her closest friend, tearfully sharing her struggles and asking for kept confidential. Unfortunately, her friend knew the promise and instead shared the information with others. The incident led to widespread rumors about the pastor's behavior, Matthew, damaging his reputation within the community. At that time, Matthew is being promoted and desires to become a local church leader. Nevertheless, his aspirations were dashed due to the swift spread of unflattering rumors about him. Matthew suffered further consequences, was dismissed from Sunday school, where he had previously been in good standing and had successfully taught God's word to the children. The decision this him was prompted by complaints from parents who had also heard about the pastor's strange hobbies Matthew. As a result, the family Matthew had to move house there and relocate to a different city in search of a fresh start. They eventually settled in Selmer, where soon gained the affection and respect of the people around them. Matthew resumed his role as a church pastor, while his wife, Mary, took on a part-time job to help supplement the family's income. Although their family is not yet peaceful, Mary and Matthew presented themselves as an ideal couple, making their family seem like a model to their neighbors and church congregation. They had become close friends with a young married couple who lived next door, often visiting and sharing holidays, news, and secrets. A few months before the tragedy happened, during a dinner at their house, Mary proudly told their friends that Matthew had bought her a gun for self-defense. He had already taken her to the shooting range several times to teach her how to use it. Mary turned out to be a quick learner, mastering the skills and accurately hitting her targets. It was discovered that the Winkler already had firearms in their home. These guns had been previously purchased by Matthew for self-defense. The guests found it puzzling that he and Mary needed so many firearms, given that they lived in a peaceful town where they had no known enemies and were well respected by their everyone. Mary and Matthew faced financial difficulties after moving to a new house. Mary began looking for part-time work and also pursued a medical degree in order to secure a job at a clinic and care for sick children. Mary then decided to commit financial fraud in an attempt to improve her family's financial situation. She claimed she didn't realize her actions were illegal and intended to repay the money once her finances improved. Specifically, she inflated her bank accounts by adding false funds. Mary received checks from unknown sources, totaling almost $177,000, and deposited them into a joint account with her husband. Her substantial deposits caught the attention of bank employees, and they invited Mary and Matthew to the bank branch to discuss and clarify the transactions. Mary and Matthew failed to appear at the bank, which heightened the suspicions. It was initially assumed that Matthew was unaware of his wife's actions. On March 22, 2006, the quiet town of Selmer, Tennessee, was shaken by a shocking crime. The body of 31-year-old pastor Matthew Winkler was found in his home, a victim of murder. The news became even more alarming as it was discovered that Matthew's wife, Mary, and their 3 young daughters, 8-year-old Patricia, 6-year-old Maria Eliza, and 1-year-old Brianna, had mysteriously disappeared. Matthew's absence from the evening church service at Christ Cathedral was very unusual. As a responsible person, he usually informed others if there were any changes to his plans, so his failure to attend was suspicious. The situation became more alarming when numerous phone calls to his family's home went unanswered. The neighbors decided to go to Matthew's house to find out what had happened and if they needed any help. From the outside, the house appeared normal, the windows and doors were intact, and there was nothing suspicious. Inside, there were lights on in several rooms, and they could hear a rather loud television coming from one room. This shows that the homeowner is probably busy doing their own thing, but no one answered when they knocked on the front door. The door was locked, and subsequent phone calls also went unanswered. It was impossible for them to see inside through the curtained windows, leaving them unsure if anyone was actually present. Even though the situation appeared unusual, the neighbors did not call the police. Instead, they called an elder in the community, and he suggested finding a spare key to open the door. It took an additional hour and a half to find a key, but once they entered, they encountered a strange and unsettling atmosphere. The interior of the house was perfectly intact, with no signs of forced entry, but the owners were missing. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but this sense of normalcy changed when they entered the master bedroom. In Matthew and Mary's bedroom, they witnessed a horrifying sight. the pastor's Matthew body lay on the floor in a large pool of blood. A massive gunshot wound had torn through his back, with blood splatters covering the surrounding area and dried, bloody foam on his face. The body had stiffened, indicating that it had been lying there for many hours. Matthew was still dressed in his pajamas, suggesting that he was likely shot in the morning. It was not until this time that the police officially received the call reporting this tragic incident. By the time the police arrived, a large crowd had gathered around the house, including neighbors, church members, and people passing by. However, the presence of this crowd caused big problems for the investigation. As they stood around, they unknowingly left behind fingerprints and inadvertently damaged or destroyed evidence, making it much harder for investigators to do their job. The police took the victim's, Matthew's body for a forensic examination, which revealed that he was shot once in the back with a large caliber gun. The wound caused massive blood loss, leading to his death just a few minutes later. Sadly, he was unable to call for help before succumbing to his injuries. It was impossible to confirm whether any strangers were in the house during the crime because the evidence was damaged by those who came before the police. The crime scene was unusual, and key witnesses seemed to have vanished. The whereabouts of the wife and daughters of Matthew remained a mystery. The police suspected that Mary and children might have been kidnapped or possibly murdered. In addition to their disappearance, the family's minivan was also missing from the garage. A large-scale search operation was initiated, prompting a yellow alert from the state, which signaled that children were missing. As a result, all citizens were asked to remain vigilant and assist in locating them. Mary's disappearance raised suspicions when her husband, Matthew, was found murdered in their home. Authorities worried that Mary and daughters might also be in danger and issued a notice searching for them. At first, police believed Mary was a victim due to her timid personality. However, as they dug deeper and collected more evidence, including financial information and witness statements from neighbors, the focus shifted, and Mary became the primary suspect in her husband's murder investigation, Matthew. It was essential to locate Mary as soon as possible and determine the whereabouts of the children, ensuring their safety. The family and their vehicle were immediately added to the missing list. Authorities also attempted to track Mary's bank card transactions and locate her using her mobile phone signal. Mary was discovered the next day in a resort town in Alabama, where she and her children were enjoying themselves at a local amusement park. It seemed as though she wanted to give her children a final, memorable experience, possibly because she knew she would soon be facing prison time. When the family was questioned at the police station, the two older daughters recounted the story with confidence. They explained that intruders had broken into their house, injured their father, and their mother had used a gun to protect them. They were then forced to flee to save their lives. According to the girls, their father was recovering in the hospital, and they expected to visit him soon and then return home. Patricia and Maria Eliza did not witness the incident that occurred in their house. Instead, they learned about them from their mother's account, Mary. All they knew was that they heard a gunshot and caught a glimpse of their father lying on the floor. Their mother quickly put them in the car and they drove away from the scene. Although Mary initially confessed, but then she stated that she couldn't recall the entire sequence of incident due to a temporary lapse in memory. Mary alleged that her husband, Matthew, had been emotionally and physically abusing her for years. He would often humiliate her and coerced her into having sex according to his will. Mary claimed it was Matthew who initially conceived the financial scam and she only did as he said. Matthew was known to have a short temper, would become enraged easily, and had a history of physical violence. His former secretary corroborated these allegations, stating that she frequently saw Matthew yell at his wife, who would bring him lunch at church, but he would always find fault with something she did. The evening before the murder, a heated argument broke out between Mary and her husband, Matthew, resulting in them spending the night in separate rooms. Mary was distraught and spent the entire night crying. The next morning, still distraught, she inadvertently picked up the loaded shotgun her husband kept in the house. With the gun in hand, she went to Matthew's room and shot him in the back while he was still in bed. He collapsed to the floor, bleeding profusely and gasping for air. He tried to speak and managed to whisper a single question to Mary, "Why?" In response, she simply said, "Sorry, so sorry." Mary then took her daughters and left the house. Despite his attempt to call for help by reaching for the phone, Matthew didn't have the strength to make the call. The murder weapon was discovered in the trunk of the car Mary had used to transport the children. It remains unclear why she took it with her. At the trial, Mary was unable to provide an explanation. A key piece of evidence presented at the trial was the role-playing costumes found at Mary's residence. These pieces of evidence proved that Matthew had forced his sexual desires on his wife and how he had abused her. Mary's reaction upon seeing the costumes was striking. She initially turned pale and then became hysterical. Despite providing multiple, conflicting accounts of the events, the court ultimately concluded that she was a victim of domestic abuse. The court found that Mary's years of accumulated feelings of anger, resentment, and pain eventually led to the murder. Despite acknowledging her history of abuse, the court still held Mary accountable for her actions. In April 2007, the court reached its final decision. Mary Winkler was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, but her mental state at the time has caused much controversy. Initially, it was anticipated that Mary would face a minimum prison sentence of 6 years. However, she was ultimately sentenced to less than 1 year. A portion of this sentence, Mary spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital where experts evaluated her mental fitness to regain custody of her children. Upon Mary's release in summer 2008, she was given custody of her daughter, who had been living with their paternal grandparents. However, Matthew's parents were outraged by this decision, as they firmly believed Mary was responsible for their son's death and felt Mary hadn't received an adequate punishment. They were further distressed by the thought of their granddaughter being cared for by the woman they thought had intentionally killed their son. Despite multiple attempts to appeal the custody decision, they were unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the fraud case against Mary was dropped, as the bank chose not to file formal charges and pursued the matter in no further. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sierra Juffin. Sierra Juffin is a young girl who gets along with everyone. She has a cheerful, humorous, and energetic personality that brings joy to those around her. Even when she makes mistakes, she knows how to make her mother smile. As she grows up and enters high school, Sierra has maintained her adventurous spirit. She is not afraid to try new experiences, such as playing volleyball, and she is comfortable and confident both on and off the court. On July 19, 2016, Juffin's family returned home from vacation and started unpacking. Sierra was excited about her upcoming fall semester at university, especially her plans to study abroad. Her mother wanted to talk to her about it. Sierra is very active and recently bought a bike, but she hasn't had the chance to ride it yet. Whenever she finds some free time, she's eager to go biking. That day, Sierra left the house dressed casually in shorts and a tank top, with her hair in a ponytail. She told her mother she was going to visit her boyfriend Josh, who lives 712 miles away, and her mother approved of her plan. At approximately 1:05 p.m., Josh called Sierra's house. He was concerned because he couldn't reach her. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mother if she was home, she replied that Sierra wasn't home. Josh then informed Sierra's mother that Sierra had left his house shortly before 7 p.m. and that he hadn't seen or heard from her since. Sierra's mother immediately sensed that something was wrong because Sierra wasn't answering her phone as she usually did. She quickly contacted Sierra's parents and grandparents, who lived nearby, but they had no idea where Sierra was. Extremely worried about their daughter's safety, Sierra's and Josh's families began an urgent search. Sierra's mother immediately got in the car and was determined to search everywhere possible. She carefully checked every corner and both side of the road, but still could not find any trace of Sierra. Meanwhile, Sierra's aunt, along with her husband and son, also joined the search. They were worried that Sierra might have had an accident. Despite their best efforts, they still could not find any sign of her. When Sierra's mother returned home, she urgently contacted Sierra's friends via social media, hoping that someone had seen or heard news about her. However, there was no response. After many hours, there was still no sign of Sierra. Very worried, Sierra's mother decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a neighbor called to report that County Road 6 was blocked. Sierra's family rushed out of their home to see what was happening. They found a chaotic scene, with police officers refusing to let them through and providing no information. This left Sierra's mother in a panic, wondering if the police had found her missing daughter. Desperate for information, local police decided to seek the assistance of the FBI. EY promised to provide any updates to Sierra's family as soon as possible. Sierra's family couldn't sleep and lay awake, thinking about what they should do the next day. Sierra's mother and aunt refused to wait for answers and took matters into their own hands. Her mother began calling hospitals, hoping to find any sign of Sierra. After several calls with no results, they felt increasingly hopeless. However, a glimmer of hope appeared when they received a tip from Detroit, Michigan, about a young girl who bore a striking resemblance to Sierra. That woman was taken to the hospital without any identification after trying to escape from a moving car. She was severely injured, with multiple broken bones. In order to identify her, a nurse asked Sierra's family to check her body. Sierra's mother confirmed that Sierra had a scar on her calf and a pierced navel. The woman in the hospital appeared to match Sierra's description. Sierra's family hoped that the girl in the hospital was Sierra. However, they quickly discovered that it was not her, which was devastating for them, as they had pinned so much hope on finding Sierra. The next morning, police came to Sierra's home to provide an update on the events of the previous night. They reported that one of their officers had discovered a destroyed cornfield nearby. When he arrived at the area, he noticed signs of a struggle. He also saw traces of a motorcycle and decided not to disturb any evidence. During the incident, he caught a glimpse of Sierra's purple bicycle. Police later found several items at the scene, including both men's and women's sunglasses, a pair of bloody socks, and a screwdriver. Based on these findings, the police believe Sierra was abducted at this location. During the investigation, detectives extensively interviewed Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend, Josh. Through their inquiries, they discovered that Sierra and Josh had been best friends since they were 7 years old. Their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship during their freshman year of high school, where they were known to be a lively and fun-loving couple. One of their shared passions was skiing, which they often enjoyed together. After graduating from high school, Sierra chose to attend the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green. Despite the distance, their commitment to their relationship remained strong, and they frequently discussed the prospect of marriage. However, Sierra wanted to prioritize her studies before settling down. Their relationship remained serious, and they had weathered the challenges of a long-distance relationship. Detectives determined that Sierra arrived at Josh's home at approximately 1 p.m. on July 19th. According to the information they gathered, at around 6:30 p.m. that day, Sierra decided to leave Josh's home and wanted to ride her bike home. Concerned for her safety, Josh offered to accompany her on his motorcycle. However, On the way home, Sierra insisted that Josh turn around and let her walk home by herself, wanting to demonstrate her independence. Josh reluctantly agreed, and they parted ways, with him returning on his motorcycle and Sierra continuing her ride home. During the investigation, detectives found motorcycle tracks in the corn near Sierra's bike. This raised the question of whether these tracks could belong to Josh's bike. Detectives could not ignore this potential connection and began gathering more evidence to determine if there was any link to Josh at the scene. They quickly organized a search team to look for any clues about Sierra's missing. On July 14th, a resident reported that, while driving down the road, they picked up a motorcycle helmet lying on the side of the road. When they heard about Sierra's situation, they decided to take a closer look at the helmet and found red stains on it, possibly blood. The helmet was found in the area near where Sierra's bike was located in the cornfield. To find the owner of the helmet, the police approached Josh regarding his motorcycle helmet. Josh provided the helmet, proving that he had been wearing it when he went out. Additionally, the police confirmed that Josh had returned home after interrogating his parents. This evidence eliminated Josh from the list of suspects involved in Sierra's missing. Investigators were determined to identify the owner of the blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the side of the road. They recognized the importance of DNA evidence, so they decided to send it to the crime lab for analysis. News of Sierra's missing quickly spread through the community. Residents formed search parties to thoroughly explore the area for any clues that could help locate her. The community also organized a candlelight vigil for Sierra at the local high school. Hundreds attended, holding flickering candles, as they came together in a display of grief, hope to her safe return. 2 days into the investigation into Sierra's missing, police received information about a truck seen speeding through the area. There was speculation that Sierra might have been kidnapped and sexually trafficked in the truck. The informant provided the police with the license plate number. Based on this clue, they interviewed the truck's owner. It was discovered that the speeding truck was not related to Sierra's abduction. The man explained that another car had suddenly pulled up from behind, possibly a family member searching for Sierra, which startled him. Consequently, he instinctively accelerated. After 48 hours of investigation, there were no leads on Sierra's whereabouts. Her family found it increasingly difficult to remain hopeful as each day passed and the chances of finding her alive diminished. Although they tried to remain optimistic, the grim reality of the situation became increasingly hard to ignore. The police conducted a door-to-door search for Sierra. Eventually, the investigation led them to a farm not far from where her bicycle was found. The property was about an acre in size and included several structures, such as a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of the property, James Worley, was met by the police at the farm and was questioned about the day Sierra went missing, hoping to gather relevant information. James surprisingly revealed that he had gone out on a motorbike that day, but the bike had broken down, causing him to lose some items, such as a screwdriver and a helmet. This revelation shocked the detectives, as those items were the same ones found at the scene of Sierra's abduction. James's unwitting involvement in the crime scene became a red flag for the detectives. Sierra's missing and her connection to James were becoming increasingly suspicious. While questioning James Worley, the detectives noticed scratches on his face, indicating that he had been involved in a fight. This further intensified the police's suspicions regarding James and raised numerous questions, such as whether the scratches were the result of a confrontation with Sierra. Detectives returned to the police station after questioning James Worley about Sierra's missing. They wanted to check his file, hoping to find relevant information. As they dug into James's past, they discovered that he had a dark criminal record, which included an attempted kidnapping of a young girl 26 years earlier, on July 4, 1989. On July 4, 1989, 26-year-old Robin Garter planned to attend a neighborhood picnic. Her mother was preparing potato salad and other food for the event. Robin thought it would be a good idea to go for a bike ride before the picnic. However, she had not brought any water with her, and it was getting very hot and uncomfortable. At that point, Robin considered going home to quench her thirst. Just as she was about to leave, she heard the sound of a car approaching. Robin figured she would wait for the car to pass and then go home. But before she could react, the car struck her bicycle. After the collision, Robin was hauled into the ditch by the side of the road. Dazed and confused, she still heard the driver stop and run out to check on her. The driver was none other than James, approached Robin anxiously, trying to assess the situation. The situation quickly became very dangerous. James suddenly struck Robin from behind, hitting her head very hard. Then, he pressed a screwdriver to her neck, threatening her life with menacing words. He ordered Robin to get into his car immediately. With the screwdriver pressed to her neck, James forced Robin into the car. After pushing her inside, he attempted to handcuff her. However, Robin resisted strongly, not allowing him to secure the second handcuff. Despite her screams for help, there was no one in the deserted field to hear her cries. Robin's persistent struggle against him caused her to nearly faint several times, but she persevered. In the unusual silence, she suddenly heard a faint sound in the distance. And she looked closely. She noticed a motorbike approaching James's vehicle. Realizing that this might be her only chance to escape, Robin began waving her arms repeatedly to attract the motorcyclist's attention. Fortunately, the motorcyclist recognized her urgency and quickly stopped. In her desperate plea for help, Robin told the motorcyclist that James intended to kidnap her. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the back of the motorbike, escaping her captor and the vehicle. The man on the motorbike took Robin home, where she eventually fainted. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance. The motorcyclist, wanting to assist the authorities, led the police back to the scene. They were surprised to find James Worley still there with his car. When questioned, James was cooperative and provided identification to confirm his identity. However, his version of the story differed significantly from what was initially believed. He completely denied any intention to kidnap Robin. According to James, Robin had been riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, which left him unable to avoid a collision. He claimed that after the accident, Robin was in a state of panic, which was why he had handcuffed her, not with the intention of causing harm, but to tie her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted that his actions were motivated solely by genuine concern for her well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 after attempting to kidnap Robin. He was convicted of kidnapping and subsequently incarcerated in the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. James was sentenced to 6 to 10 years in prison but was released 3 years later for good behavior. When Robin learned that the man who had tried to kidnap her was released, she was terrified. The fear that James might strike again haunted her. Armed with information about James Worley's criminal past, the police decided to visit his residence. With a search warrant in hand, the officers went to the home of James, who was suspected of being involved in Sierra's missing. They found nothing unusual in the house. However, when they examined James's backyard, they discovered a small shed tucked away in the corner. Upon opening the shed, they found several bales of hay inside. The officers conducted a thorough search of the barn and the surrounding area, looking for evidence that could link James to Sierra's missing. All areas were searched meticulously, with the aim of uncovering any hidden items or clues. During the search, the detectives found a small green box hidden in a corner of James Worley's barn. They carefully approached and opened the box, revealing its contents. Inside, they found several carefully labeled and sealed bags containing underwear, socks, and tube tops in Ziploc plastic bags. As they examined the other items, they came across a pair of purple panties stained with a blood-like substance. The detectives were concerned about other disturbing discoveries that might await them in their search of James's compound. The detectives noticed a piece of plywood on the ground. Recognizing its potential importance, they carefully removed the board to reveal a small chest freezer buried in the barn. When they opened the freezer, they detected a strong chemical odor similar to bleach, which heightened their suspicions. As they continued to investigate, they found other disturbing elements partially hidden among the straw bales. Among the items discovered was a dirty mattress pad. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys intensified their concerns, as these items are often associated with kidnappings and other nefarious activities. Detectives collected all the evidence for DNA testing. James attempted to defend himself by claiming that the items were part of a pornographic entertainment business he was planning. However, the evidence gathered was far too overwhelming to support his explanation. The combination of evidence collected from T. He crime scene, along with the incriminating items, led to James' arrest for Sierra's murder. Sierra's family was shocked to learn that her abductor lived far from her home. This revelation left them with many questions, the most pressing of which was undoubtedly, where was she? Detectives conducted a thorough investigation of James' property, leaving no stone unturned. They meticulously searched every inch of the property to ensure a comprehensive examination. To aid in the search dogs were brought in to detect any potential human remains. During the investigation, detectives discovered a pond. Recognizing its potential significance, they carefully drained the pond to search for evidence that might have been concealed beneath the water. Detectives examined the insulation at the front of the attic. As the investigation continued, they expanded their search to neighboring properties, realizing that evidence might be scattered outside James's property. They patiently pursued leads in all directions. At that time, a farmer walking in his field noticed a strange area of corn that appeared to be covered. He decided to investigate further. As he approached the area, he saw a mound of dirt and immediately thought it could be a grave. The farmer's concerns were heightened by the recent events surrounding the search for Sierra. He wasted no time in calling the police, sharing his suspicions and the exact location. When the farmer called for help, the police arrived on the scene. They noticed a newly turned area of dirt, which led them to suspect it could be a grave. After carefully assessing the situation, the police began investigating the area, taking care not to disturb any potential evidence. The police conducted a thorough search of the scene, hoping to find clues about Sierra's whereabouts. However, despite their best efforts, their search was fruitless. Detectives expanded their search, using drones and helicopters to survey nearby farms in hopes of increasing air chances of finding Sierra. During their investigation, the detectives discovered an area of land covered with fresh corn. Their dogs detected the smell of decomposition, suggesting that this could be a crime scene. When investigators dug into the area, they discovered the remains of a person. Based on the evidence, it was believed that this was Sierra's body. Unfortunately, her hands and feet were bound, and there was a foreign object lodged in her mouth, making it difficult for her to breathe. The evidence suggested that she had died of asphyxiation. That night, Sierra's family received the devastating news they had feared. The police had found Sierra's lifeless body. The news was heartbreaking, and the family wept. It was a tragic moment, and they were overwhelmed with grief. A month after Sierra's abduction and murder, James Worley was indicted on 19 related charges, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, James went to trial on these charges. Despite overwhelming evidence against him, James pleaded not guilty to all counts. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning their verdict in James Worley's case. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, James was convicted on all counts related to Sierra's murder. The severity of the crime resulted in the imposition of the death penalty for James Worley. In conclusion, the harrowing case of Sierra Juffin has come to a tragic end, revealing the dark depths of human cruelty and the devastating impact it can have on a family and community. The relentless pursuit of justice led to the discovery of Sierra's remains and the conviction of James Worley, whose past offenses and heinous actions were instrumental in bringing him to justice. As Sierra's family continues to mourn their loss, they can find some measure of solace in knowing that James Worley has been held accountable. This case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and the enduring fight for our justice in the face of profound tragedy.